Oh, oh, check it out.
Welcome to this installment of the Division G webinar series. Launched in 2014 by the AERA Grad Student Executive Committee, these conversations highlight scholarship, discuss contemporary issues, and connect DivG members with the greater educational community. For an archive of our previous webinars, please visit the AERA Division G YouTube channel. Also, be sure to join our Facebook groups, AERA Division G Students and AERA Division G, Social Context of Education. Follow us on Twitter at AERADivG. This conversation will also be hashtag DivGChat. We'll be live tweeting it, and so if you use that hashtag, we will be able to connect the conversation. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ariana Castro, and I'm a second-year doctoral student at Michigan State University studying teacher education. My preferred gender pronouns are she, her, and hers.
And my name is Shayna Sanchez. I am the other co-host for the day. I am a fourth-year doctoral candidate at the University of California in Los Angeles, and my gender pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm also our Division G Junior Graduate Student Representative, and beginning after our AERA annual meeting this year, I will become the senior rep for the incoming year.
Excellent. And we're looking forward to having Shayna at the helm of our graduate student body. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from three graduate students: Tashal Brown, who is a third-year grad student in teacher education at Michigan State with me; Terrance, who studies higher education at Michigan State, whoop whoop; and Hui-Ling Malone, a second-year graduate student in teaching and learning of urban ed at NYU. They will be talking about their experiences as grad students attending AERA and what we can expect next week in New York City. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna hand it over to Shayna for questions.
So we'll begin today, thank you, Eliana. We'll begin today by asking our guests just a few questions, and then we're gonna open it up to our audience. If you have a question, please type it into the Zoom chat box by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of the screen to open it up. And then we're going to ask the question to our guests as the time allows towards the end. So we're gonna begin with our guests sharing who they are, how they describe their work and research interests, and their connections to New York City as a place that they consider home or where they do research and how it affects the research they do.
All right, so hi, my name is Tashal Brown, and I'm a former educator. I taught in New York City public and charter schools, and I was raised in the Bronx. So New York City is my home. In terms of my work explores the question, how can we foster desire-based educational spaces that engage youth of color in critical examinations of power in their everyday lives? And in doing so, my scholarship is situated at the intersections of urban education, Black feminism, girlhood, and critical literacies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hui-Ling Malone, as was mentioned earlier, and I'm attending New York University right now. So I also was a former educator but mostly in Detroit and Los Angeles. But now here I am I'm interested in researching community centricity within education, so focusing on more of the collective when we are looking at teaching and learning practices, looking at what's going on in surrounding communities. So I've been fortunate to be a part of some research studies in the city, some of them looking at youth organizing and youth leadership councils to see how that may affect their developmental competencies and critical consciousness, and some other cool stuff going on with high school students in like the South Bronx, and another project with students looking at disproportionality across New York City, particularly New York State has cited the NYCB for disproportionality, meaning that Black and brown students are being disproportionately disciplined. So I'm working with a group of students that are investigating that and action planning around that. So yeah.
So hi everyone, I'm Terrance. I'm a fourth-year doctoral student at Michigan State University. My connection to New York, my father's actually from New York, so we would go and visit when we were younger, me and my younger brother and my mom. I've done some work in New York, and what I currently investigate and sort of interrogate right now in my scholarship are questions around leadership and executive leadership. And I look at how university presidents manage major racial campus crises. And so the best way to think about my work is I tend to prime people with a scenario One that happened on the University of Missouri's campus around racial incidents and how the president managed or mismanaged, depending upon who you ask, that fallout. And so my work interrogates that, asks questions around leadership, the types of organizational behavioral outcomes that leaders find themselves in and situate themselves in. And so that's what I kind of explore across the board, both domestically and internationally.
Awesome, thank you. Y'all are doing really interesting and sounds like really awesome work, so thanks for sharing. And so next we'd like to talk to you about what you're looking forward to at the annual meeting and why you're going this year. And of course, if you want to plug your own session and your own talk, please feel free to do so right here, so that we can all know where to find you.
So I'm gonna talk. Stop. So why am I going this year? I'm presenting. This is my third time going to AERA. And I presented last year, and I'm also presenting this year on a roundtable with Dorinda Carter-Andrews, who's a professor here at Michigan State, and my colleagues Eliana Castro and Ifet Edine. Our paper is titled "To Be Perfect and White, the Racialized and Gendered Operation of Power in Schools." And it's based on focus groups we did with high school and elementary girls within different Michigan schools, specifically Black girls. So we're talking about their experiences within these school spaces around their race and gender. And our roundtable is at 8:15 on Tuesday. So that's primarily why I'm going to be at AERA, but I would probably be there anyway. But definitely come check us out on Tuesday, 8:15 a.m.
Well, I'm not presenting at AERA, but I'm going, obviously, to New York City. So this would be my second AERA, and I just think it's a good opportunity to see what other scholars across the nation are doing. It was San Antonio, I thought was great. I got to learn a lot. I'm looking forward to presentations like Tashal just mentioned. There are some events though. One group of youth that I was working with, I was doing like sub-research on this larger project. Educational Video Center is a group that's here in New York City, and they are presenting about their learning experiences in this like after school filmmaking experience. So the group that I was looking and doing research with was focusing on like teenage pregnancy, specifically in the Bronx, and some of the participants were all, like, you know, also experiencing like teenage pregnancy or were teenage moms. And so they made this really cool documentary. So they'll be showing that, and the students will be there on Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. at City As High School. And then I would also check out Urban Word NYC. They're having their event on Friday as well. Is it Friday? I have to check for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of great stuff going on. Metro Center, where I work, will also be involved hosting stuff. So I would come and check all of that out.
So just a quick plug, I went to City As High School. I graduated.
Oh, yes, I love it.
So I'm going to New York for several reasons, but I think one of the more important ones is that I serve as this year's GSC program chair. And so I'll be there in service to the GSC and the AERA at large. I don't have any papers or panels that I'm serving on formally with my work, but I am working with the professional development arm of AERA to sit on a panel to talk to undergraduate scholars and emerging scholars around pathways, academic pathways, and how they can position themselves for competitive programs and situate themselves within different academic circles. And so I'll be able to share some insights from my perspective and lived experiences in that realm. And then I have a plug, and I think it's going to be an amazing event. I'm working closely with this year's GSC chair, Keisha, on it, and some other folks, but I think it's going to be awesome, and I encourage everyone to check it out. If you don't go to any other session, please come to this one. It's a graduate student orientation and joint reception that we're hosting on Friday, April 13th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. There are going to be several prizes. I think I have a volunteer role where I'm emceeing parts of it. So we're going to turn up. It's going to be good. A lot of division reps will be there. A lot of folks in the room. It'll be a good networking session. And so I encourage everyone to come by say hello. And again, I think it'll definitely be well worth it. And so it should be an exciting year and time for us in New York. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it should be good.
So while everybody is writing down all of the sessions that they want to go to between our speakers, I just want to plug our Division G graduate student sessions. So the first one is going to be on Saturday, and that is our student session titled The Necessity of Critical Race Theory in Public Education. And then the following, on Monday in the morning from 8:15 to 9:45 a.m., we're going to have our Division G fireside chat titled Rethinking Academic Expectations, doing good for our communities while in the academy. So I hope y'all can make it. And all this information is going to be on our blog and throughout our social media. And then, of course, speaking of turning up, we also want to invite everybody to come to our Division G business meeting. And reception and social will follow. And that'll be on Monday, April 16th at 15 p.m. All right. So our next question for our speakers is that in anticipation of next week's annual meeting, I can't believe it's already next week, we'd like to just ask you a few questions about preparing for AERA. And, this is a conversation. We don't have to go in like a formal order. But the first question is, do you have any tips for preparing for the meeting?
So I would say, like I said, this is my third time going, and one way that I've prepared in the past and also this time as well is I've went into, you can go on either on the app or on the website of AERA, and then what I have done is search scholars that I'm interested in, like in particular, I'm interested in scholars like Ruth Nicole Brown, for example. So I'll like look up their names to see what sessions they're a part of, whether they're like the discussant or are they presenting a paper. So in sessions where that scholar might be a discussant, it's a way for me to see like some other scholars who might be doing similar kind of work that I've never heard of their work before. So this way I can get familiar with like upcoming scholars and grad students as well. So that's primarily what I do, but I also like search keywords in relation to like my own research interests to see like what other scholars are doing, and then maybe attend those roundtables or paper sessions. Because I think it's important because there's so many sessions, you can get overwhelmed. You should really know ahead of time ones that you really want to go to so that you can block off that time to make sure you attend and you know where it is, especially in a place like New York where you see that the sessions are happening in different locations. Knowing ahead of time can help you plan for like how you're going to get there, when you're going to get there, travel time and things like that. So I would definitely suggest like looking through, obviously there's so many sessions, so using the keywords or looking for scholars will help you kind of narrow it a little. And to me, that helps in terms of navigating such a large conference like AERA.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd echo everything Tashal has mentioned. I think if you have an opportunity, definitely use the app. But if you don't have the app on your phone or the capacity on your phone to use it, go to the AERA website. There's actually a search feature on their platform when you log in with your username and password, and you can search programs by different themes, by time, by person, by room, by session type, by some sort of descriptor word, as Tashal mentioned. I also think it's helpful as well to, before you go, kind of take a step back and ask yourself, what are the professional or academic or personal goals that you set forth for the next 6 to 12 months, right? Because it can be overwhelming, especially if you're thinking about going into the academy or whatever your sort of career trajectory is. Sometimes it can be overwhelming because you're thinking about, wait, I want to get tenure, but wait, do I go to this session and which one's relevant? It can be a lot, right? And I hope it's not your final AERA meeting. And so what I would do is sort of take a step back and just very simply write down 5 to 10 sort of immediate objectives in terms of where you want to grow, areas of your professional development that you want to cultivate and bolster, and then use that to drive your interest for receptions, for meetings, for people you want to meet, for scholars, so that you kind of go in with a game plan, because as you can imagine, some of the scholars are in high demand. And, if you get an opportunity with them, you may not have an hour, maybe just be 10 minutes. But that's an opportunity for you to engage them. And if you've thought through it beforehand, it definitely makes you come across more prepared. You're in your A game, and you can be more intentional about your time. And so that's what I would do if I were you, as a recommendation, is sort of take a step back, think about immediate goals, go on with the game plan, and definitely use all of the suggestions that Tashal and the others will mention on the call today.
Yeah, thanks. Those points are really great, and I appreciate the advice. Just a funny story. I actually like ran into Gloria Lansing Billings like after one of our talks. I was like, oh, I'll never meet her, but she was just there. So I was like, she was there. I was there. I was like, what do I do? So I, I just kind of approached her. I was like, oh, Dr. Lansing Billings, I love your work. I'm one of David Kirkland's students, blah, blah, blah. And, it was really fast, really quick. I'm sure I like harassed her, but it was just great to be able to introduce myself to someone that I like appreciated their work so much. But to add, the only thing else I would add is, since there is so many things to do at AERA, there's so many sessions of interest, like if you're going with a friend or a colleague, maybe split them up, divide them, and then exchange notes afterward. Also, I tend to lean on my advisor sometimes. Like I'll ask Dr. Kirkland, like, well, what do you recommend? Is there, something on that should be on my radar? And he sometimes helps guide me to things that I should be at that are helpful.
Thank you. And so it was brought up a couple of times about the sessions, but how do you decide what session to attend? Does anybody else have anything to add in terms of like how you narrow stuff down? I know we mentioned the app is really helpful, but are there any other strategies or ways that you think about which sessions to attend?
For me, I think one strategy that I have, and this is I think my fourth AERA meeting. I failed to mention that earlier, but what I try to do is think about the sessions that are probably difficult to maybe access, or like maybe having scholars in a particular space. There might be barriers that like if I don't live in New York, right, and I want to work with Kirkland, right? I think you want to be intentional about that, because if you're in a space where like AERA, and this is sort of a once in a, I guess, lifetime chance to kind of work with Gloria Lansing Billings or some other scholars, I try to organize the sessions around that in terms of high priority. There might be other sessions where I can kind of get the information secondhand through a colleague, a peer. I may see that person at another regional conference. Think about those as well. Some of us are really involved in our regional associations, and that's something to think about. So with AERA, because it can be overwhelming, I think one strategy is to really think about what are the high priority sessions or meetings or receptions that I want to attend that I likely won't have a chance to for whatever reason, whether it be budgets or capacity or even my time. And so then I kind of go down from there in terms of high priority to low priority, and then organize and sort and come up with a game plan and execute from there.
I think for me, one thing that I'm really focused on is thinking about who's doing similar work to what I'm doing, because I think that's important, especially for like being a grad student and like trying to like just build on my research. I think it's important to think about who's doing things that are similar, whether they're grad students or whether they are like more established scholars. I think sometimes people only focus on the superstars, and like I think that's good. You have people that you've been reading their work for a while and you're really excited about them. But I think we also should be thinking of ourselves as like, upcoming scholars in the field. So how can we cultivate that? And some of that is like, looking at the work of other scholars that are in your position as well. And so in the past, I've met with other scholars who I've been reading their work, and they're grad students. And so I think that has been beneficial for me, and I want to continue to do that. So I've been thinking about the sessions that I go to and who are the people who are presenting on that panel, and where are they at in their careers. So just so that I'm mixing it up and I'm not only focusing on superstar scholars who have been established in the field, but also upcoming scholars. So I have a diversity of people that I'm interested in their work.
Yeah, I think Tashal and Terrance are really on point. I don't really have much more to add. I appreciate that point of not just looking at who's big in the field and who's famous, but like who's doing similar work and how can you learn from others and how can you grow in your field and your expertise, regardless if they're another grad student or. established scholar or whatever.
And so do you set up professional goals for the meeting?
I guess it depends. I mean, how one would define professional goals. You know, if someone's trying to get a job, then perhaps, yeah. You know, I think of me. I always encourage people. I say, you know, it's about finesse, right? How are you going to finesse the meeting? How are you going to finesse your resume and your strengths, kind of to lift up what Tashal was mentioning. And if the goal is to make contact with maybe a vendor or a scholar or another peer, I'd write those down and keep them manageable. You know, I think that makes it digestible for folks instead of just having lofty 100 bullet point goals. You know, I try to keep it simple. You know, it could be, you know, connect with a scholar doing research on indigeneity at UCLA. That could be the goal, right? And I just go to the reception. It could be someone I meet that I didn't know before. And then, you know, boom, I check that off as a goal, and I made it happen. And it's just my responsibility to kind of cultivate that relationship and follow up on it. But I think that might depend on the person. And I, you know, for me, I just try to keep it simple, and I follow up on it and execute and manage it from there.
Yeah, and I would just add to that and saying that one way is like going to smaller things too. So like I'm going to the Division G pre-conference session, which is on Friday morning, the first day of AERA. And last year I went to CESJ's session for the pre-conference session, and that was really helpful because I was meeting like other grad students, but also they had faculty there as well, and so I was able to have some conversations with different faculty like Dumas and Sonia Nieto was at CESJ last year. And so that's something to think about too, is like doing some of this pre-conference stuff. And right now it's too late because it's like the conference is like next week, but in the future, that's something to think about in relation to like SIGs that you're a part of, or divisions that you're a part of, and seeing what are some of the pre-conference stuff they have going on, but also things like the business meetings and stuff like that.
So kind of like along those lines of professional goals, do you plan to and strategize around marketing yourself? And, you know, like how does that process look like for you? I guess another way to put it is like, you know, like what kind of scholar do you see yourself as, and how do you put yourself together in a way that it communicates that scholar that you either see yourself as or strive to be or are on your way to becoming, especially around like perhaps networking. I saw a couple of questions pop up about networking, so maybe this is a good time to touch on that and how you know, just put yourself together to present yourself to people you want to meet or groups that you want to be a part of.
Well, that was tricky at first to think about, but I'll be short. I think I would just want to communicate who I am genuinely, not putting on any airs like this is who I am, this is what I'm interested, I'm passionate about. I mean, maybe prepare a little bit of what you're studying, what you're interested in when you meet people, maybe have a business card. But I wouldn't want to portray anybody but who I genuinely am when I'm in these spaces. And I know we all get kind of caught up, like we have to put on like a certain face, especially for students of color. But I think, you know, being genuine speaks louder than anything.
Yeah, I just keep it 100, as I would say. I mean, because people know who's faking, and then I think there's power in owning your uniqueness, right? Own that. You know, I think recognizing that we have different identities and we bring different strengths and conversation pieces to the table. I think we can engage scholars and peers and others in unique ways that are very different from perhaps some other people. And I think for me, you know, if I'm aspiring to network, well, I want to network with a scholar, I kind of talk about my work, and then always have sort of an objective, like what's the end goal beyond just, oh, I like your work. You know, like, okay, yeah, but what? Like, there has to be something else beyond that. And so I think about moving the conversation forward. Like, hey, I like your work. I think you're doing amazing things in the community. Do you mind taking a look at maybe a paragraph brief of my work, or some ideas I'm kind of thinking about, or how I might strengthen them, or think about some weaknesses that, I mean, engage them in ways where there's sort of an ask at the end. I think about networking in that way. So it's not just this blanket, like, hey, I met you, I like your work, and then it gets awkward. You're like, okay, so what? So you got to figure out what that is for each scholar and each person and each personality type, and then sort of have some discernment or temperament around when's the right time to engage them, right? Like you might catch somebody rushing, and is that the right time to engage them with that question? Or do you just wave and then kind of circle back, at a later date, or later time at the meeting? All those questions I think you have to ask and sort of in real time interrogate.
And one thing to do as well is what I tried to do this year is like email people ahead of time. Like some people that I knew that I'm like, I really want to see if they have even just like 20 minutes to chat with me during AERA. I like emailed them ahead of time and talked a little bit about what my research is and how it might be connected to some of the stuff that they're doing, and like why I'm interested in like meeting with them, and if they have time, like shooting them just my own availability, and seeing if it's possible for us to meet during AERA, because I think that is like very focused, because sometimes you might not have that time like within like when they just presented, right? There's going to be a lot of people coming up to them after who might want to talk to them. So this allows you to be a little bit more focused by like doing this work ahead of time, and planning out like who you want to actually sit down with. Also, there was a scholar that I used to work within like my practicum proposal, and so she was at the CESJ pre-conference. She's a grad student as well, and so like I zoomed in on talking to her because I used her work, and I had specific things to say about it in relation to like things that I was thinking about doing, and now like we're still in contact and stuff. So I think that just being intentional is really important, kind of like what Terrance was saying.
Thank you so much for that. And this is the NYC related part of the questions. Do you have any recommendations in terms of places to eat, sites to visit, or things to do in the time that we're in the city? Meeting's going to be super packed and kind of spread out. So maybe also throw in there thinking about what's the best way to get around New York City. It's really well known for its subway system. You can maybe talk a little bit about that, or also talk about other creative ways to get around that you found has been really easy and efficient.
So I'll speak, I guess. I'm from New York, and I'm from the Bronx, but I've like went to high school in Manhattan and worked in different boroughs, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Bronx. I would say subway is the fastest, especially because where a lot of the AERA sessions are, it's in Midtown, that Times Square area, and that is like so congested. So getting in a cab is just a non-starter, because you're gonna take so long just to move from block to block because of the traffic, that it makes more sense to either walk when you're around there or take the train. Those are the two fastest ways, walking or taking the train. I wouldn't even suggest bus. And in terms of like places to go, I would say try to get out of the Midtown Times Square area, because it's very touristy down there. It's just a lot of people and a lot of tourists. And so if you're interested in doing something else, I would say like maybe like venturing off into like Harlem, for example, and maybe going off into Brooklyn, which is a little further out, but you can do that when you have like maybe your evenings that you might want to do something. But I would definitely suggest Harlem, for example, is not that far away from Midtown. It's actually just like a couple train stops away. So you might want to go there for food. There's a lot of good restaurants. Also music. I know at Red Rooster on like Friday nights, and on Saturday nights they have music. And like sometimes they're playing really good like 80s, 90s, R&B and hip hop. And I went there over the holiday break in December when I went home, and it was so much fun. I danced like all night and I had a really good time. So if you want to hear some good music, that might be a good spot. It's a good crowd. Yeah, so my plug is definitely a lot of places in Harlem because it's close to where AERA is going to be.
I would add, definitely I would agree with get out of the touristy parts of New York City. I mean, New York City has so much to offer. It's a lot of like history there. I would be conscious of the gentrification that's happening in the city and supporting some of the more local community, whether it's like businesses, restaurants, or, there's some great youth organizations too, our community centers like How Our Lives Link Together, HALA, I think that's in Brooklyn, Urban Word NYC, I feel like that's in Manhattan. I would check out urban word. Oh, I just said that. I would check out the Schomburg Center in Harlem, Brooklyn Museum, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. There's a lot of great poetry. There's like so many things. So I would just maybe do some research on what the city has to offer you. That's not just like Starbucks and whatever else in Times Square. There's just so much.
Thank you. Terrance, did you have something to say? I thought I saw you.
No,
Okay.
ditto.
I saw you do one of these, and I was like, oh.
Nope.
And another plug, try to go to the Bronx if you can, because I feel like a lot of times people are like never in the Bronx. And so like there's some interesting things to check out in the Bronx in terms of like art and culture. So it's not just Yankee Stadium, but also like food as well. There's a lot of dope restaurants in the Bronx. And the Bronx is just a place that people don't normally go to. They stop in Manhattan and that's it. But you might have to go a little further uptown. So like I would say like even like Jamaican restaurants, for example, there's a large Caribbean community in the Bronx, but more in the Northeast Bronx where I'm from. But yeah, so lots of really good food and affordable food as well. So it just depends on how far you're willing to go. But I would suggest trying to get out of Manhattan.
So
come visit me at New York University in the Metro Center. There's like a lot of great stuff happening here, like in regards to education work. So I mean, that's just an open invitation.
Everybody's gonna come see you now. You're gonna have people flooding your doors. So awesome. Yeah, thanks for all those great tips, everybody. And just finally, we just have one little constant question that we ask during all of our webinars. What are y'all reading right now? What books, articles, poetry, literature, whatever it is that you read. It doesn't have to be, current scholarship or anything. We just like to know.
So right now, and I guess I already read this, but I'm continuously coming back to it. There's two books, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, and This Side of Home by Renee Watson. So I teach a class here at Michigan State on urban education, and we use both of those texts in the class. And so The Color of Law is about policies in relation to housing in the US, talking about like residential segregation. And then This Side of Home is a young adult book, and it's set in Portland, Oregon, and it talks a lot about gentrification. So we've been using kind of both texts to talk about housing and how that relates to education, especially in urban settings. So those are two really great books that my students have been enjoying, and myself as well. And also, it's just, they're both really informative. Yeah, and you could use them together or separately or just read on your own, especially This Side of Home, which I feel like talks about a lot of important issues, but it's from a high school student's perspective. And so it brings up just like their own coming of age in relation to issues like gentrification.
There are so many good books. There's so many, but I'll mention like Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. I mean, that's more of like the legal part. He talks about like the death penalty and his work there. Excellent book. Nobody by Mark Lamont Hill. And this book I'm reading right now, I just happen to have it. It's called Emergent Strategies by Adrienne Marie Brown. And it's a really important, like reflective book, because she talks about organizing and people in a way that like values like nature and like how, we should mirror nature and be reflective of, what's going on around us, and like thinking about our own egos and how we can better work together. She mentions Grace Lee Boggs a lot. It's an excellent book. I haven't finished it, but I read it a lot, and I read it, like I try to come back to it a lot. And last thing is Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider. I've read it, but I love to go back to her words because I don't know, it's like therapy in this program.
Yeah, those are good books. What I'm reading right now, I guess it's a combination of reading and listening to at the same time, because I listen to a lot of podcasts and throw some music in there too. But I'm reading a book called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, and he talks about, it's like 366 days of, he says 366, of Stoic philosophy and principle. Essentially, it's Stoicism is just this sort of philosophical orientation that the Romans had towards the world, and they kind of lay out these principles around perspective taking, mindfulness, being present, all those kind of principles. So it's a good book, really dope. And then I'm reading a book called The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, which is really good. People shaking their heads, so they read it. And then I'm listening to a lot of podcasts across the board, sports, organizational behavior, all that stuff. But I find that, especially in this process with pursuing a PhD, it will test you, right? In many ways. At least let me own it. I get tested in many different ways, and I find that reading books outside of sort of my work around mindfulness and stillness really help recenter me in ways to ask different kinds of questions, so that when I revisit often challenging spaces and places within my work, I can look at it from many different angles and multiple angles and challenge my own assumptions and biases, right? And think about what may or may not be influencing the assumptions and the lens that I may bring to bear on the work. And so that's been really helpful for me. I hope those two books are helpful for you all and everyone listening or watching. The Daily Stoic, and then the other one's The Celestine Prophecy.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's nice to read something that's a little bit more sort of like speaks to your soul. And I know the Celestine Prophecy is very like new age, spiritual, very it's very mind opening. So I appreciate that suggestion. So we've heard some great things, and in response to our prepared questions, we also have some audience participation that's been going on in the chat box. So we pulled out the questions, and now we're gonna just toss them out here. It's kind of a extemporaneous speaking test. So the first question is, what are the dynamics of a roundtable, like time to speak, tech support, and how is it different from participating on a panel or presenting a paper? I know Tashal can speak on that. I can speak on that. Anyone else want to jump in? What's a roundtable like?
So a roundtable is, last year I also did a roundtable, and you're at the table with other scholars who are presenting and talking about their work. So it's not as I think it's not as formal as you're on this panel, but I think it's a lot more intimate. And so you might have some other people who are sitting around the panel listening in, who are not actually participating in the roundtable, but they're participating as listeners. And so the amount of time you have depends on how many people are at the roundtable. So if you have say 3 or 4 presenters, then that reduces the amount of time. But if it's only 2 presenters, then you might have more time, maybe 25, 30 minutes to present. So I would just say it's a little bit more intimate, and there's a lot of questions being asked of the people. You might be asking questions of someone else who presented on the round table, right? And so if it's usually it's done really well that the people who are paired there, their work is similar in different ways. So you're learning from each other. And I think that's really helpful. Last year, some of the scholars who presented on the roundtable that I was also participating in, I was picking up some of their citations, oh, wow, that's really interesting work. I should read that for what we're doing. Cause I was presenting a paper that I co-wrote with my colleague Vivek Valanki. And so the both of us, we were listening to other people's work and kind of picking that up and saying, oh, we should consider this for our own paper. So I think it's also helpful in thinking through maybe how you want to forward your work or grow upon it as well, because it is really intimate. It's a really intimate time.
Yeah. Roundtables are cool. I like them. It's funny because the roundtables that I presented, I actually saw colleagues that I knew from back in the day actually come and support. And so I agree with everything Tashal mentioned. I think it's a great, depending upon the person's preference, it's a great entry point into sort of AERA as a presenter in some ways. And it's really more, to me, I like it because it sort of gets at this idea and notion of sort of dialogue and facilitation, right? And any sort of community of scholars. You really feel engaged around the table in a way that doesn't sort of have some of those structural power dynamics that some room setups might sort of rarefied, because you're around the table, you're talking, you're discussing ideas. I mean, I like it. I like it a lot. So I definitely agree with everything Tashal mentioned.
And I'd just like to add, I know that part of the question was about speaking time. I know that in our case, Tashal, the paper that Tashal and I are on, we reached out to the chair because we noticed that there were few other papers. So we wanted to know how she was thinking about dividing up that time. And so with other types of sessions, there might be a chair who basically keeps time, and then also a discussant who makes comments about the papers themselves and sort of tries to bring them together, maybe asks questions or makes suggestions. That's not the case with a roundtable. There's just a chair. And so that chair may choose to make some additional comments. They'll introduce you and then maybe toward the end, make comments, ask questions, but a lot of it too is geared toward, as both of them mentioned, discussing the ideas and hashing out maybe how you can enhance or enrich, deepen your analysis and things like that. So it really is a less formal structure and allows you to continue to develop the ideas. Great. So another question that we got from our audience is it okay to attend if you're not an awesome PhD student like all of us here on the panel? And any tips then for navigating solo?
I would say definitely come to AERA. I think one of the things about AERA that I don't quite understand is that it does seem kind of exclusive to the academic community. It really feels, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but like it feels like where academics come to like flex and turn up like that, with each other, which is, I mean, it's great. I think it's great to have that space, but I also think that there's a lot of important work being like shown there. And I think that everyone else could really benefit from that. So I would definitely go.
Yeah, and I would say I would definitely go too. In my first year, I went and I wasn't presenting. I just went because I wanted to check it out. This is when it was in DC and just see what it was like. And so it's just a way for me to just kind of get my feet wet. And I don't think you have to be like a superstar, like grad student at all to do this. And I feel like I wouldn't call myself that either. I would say that I'm like developing my work, and like in doing that, it's really important to be meeting other people across institutions and across spaces who are also maybe doing similar work. And so I think no matter where you are, kind of check out, do some networking, learn, and also learn, because you're learning from people as you go to these different sessions, right? You might be learning about things that you never heard of. And so that might be things that you can pick up in your own scholarship, or maybe this might, you might develop more questions around things that you're interested in as well. So I think no matter what stage you are in your career, I think it can be a good space to go to if you're presenting or if you're not presenting.
Yeah, like Tashal and everyone. I mean, I'm not a superstar either. I'm just trying to figure it out, and most people are. Really, they won't tell you that, but most people are trying to figure it out. And I subscribe to this idea that we're all lifelong learners, and so we can all rethink our work in different ways to invite others into the space and to really question and ask who's not there that needs to be there, right? Those are questions I would ask myself when you're in these spaces. And so, you may see colleagues who perhaps present a particular type of, I don't know, style, if you will, but you don't have to emulate that. You can just be yourself, be you, be comfortable. And I always encourage people to if you're going to flex, try to flex intellectual humility, right? And just be like, yeah, I don't know that. Could you help me understand my work? Could you help me rethink that? You have recommendations, be open to feedback, because it's cool. It's feedback, because they may help you sort of stumble upon a new phenomenon in a way that you maybe hadn't discovered before. And so that's how I approach the conference and the meeting, and everybody's going to be there, on some different wavelengths. But I think as long as you're cool, humble, as Kendrick Lamar would say, you'll be all right.
Can I just add really quick? If the community, if the work is not grounded in community and larger society, if it's not about pushing forward the collective, then there really is, personally, I feel like there's no point to the work. So I'm not like to say that we're awesome or whatever, that's very generous, but we all have these viewpoints, and we all need to be pushing forward this work from all our life experience and perspectives. I think that's what it's all about. So there's room for everybody. I think it's necessary.
And just as that point about navigating it solo, I haven't had to do that. But what I will say is that that sometimes, like when I've gone to ARA, there might be someone who is solo, and I might meet them in a panel or something, a session that I'm going to, and like we develop just a connection there where they might hang out with us later on and go to sessions with us, right? And so I think that you can do it solo, which is fine, but you will also meet people along the way. And so that's something to think about too.
Yeah, and just my 2 cents would be that treat this like it's not the last conference in the in the universe of your life, right? Like, make sure that you pace yourselves. I know I am very outgoing, but I hate small talk. So I like going to sessions, but I can't. I also don't like to leave myself open to like these awkward encounters where I feel like I'm just there out of obligation. You have to be super intentional about the sessions you're going to attend, and then also be kind to yourself. Give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Do not book every single day back to back from 8 to midnight. Just allow yourself to really soak in some of that stuff. There have been times at other conferences where I sneak away after a session to think and to write down how, the thoughts that came up during something I attended. So just bear that in mind. Your personality, take that into account, your energy level, sort of how you work. It's a little bit different for everybody, but definitely all of those tips are very helpful. So we're going to take one last question because we are nearing our time, but the last question I think is a good one to end on. The question is, what's the overall vibe of the conference? Is it casual? Is it strictly professional, mostly professional? Are things like receptions open to everybody? What do you all think?
I would say it's a mixture. It's a mixture. It's like usually pretty professional in like the daytime, but then there's other like receptions that are more chill. And people are just like socializing. So yeah, I would say it's a mixture. And there's also parties and stuff that happen as well. Like I know I've been attending for, the past 2 years, Black and Brown AERA, which I love, and we dance and have a good time and socialize. And that's really great just to chill for a second. And we're not talking about anything like academic or scholarly. We're literally just dancing and having a good time. So I would say there's like a space to do all of that. There's space for the professional, which is a lot of just attending the panels and the roundtables and stuff like that. But then there's a lot of like reception stuff and parties where you can do more just like socializing and relaxing.
But I'm gonna tell y'all where you really want to go though. Right? You have to go here. You have to go to the orientation and joint reception that the GSC is hosting. Right? And I gotta plug it again, like did it. Friday, April 13th at 1:30. Come through. We got something for everybody. We got gifts. We got music. I'll be DJing. I got some other folks DJing. I'll be on the mic, and we got other folks coming through. That's where you want to be to network. If you come by yourself, if you solo, it's good. If you come with your crew, it's good. Everybody's going to be there. You might see some major players in there, too, in terms of, like, senior researchers, folks doing good work. You might see peers that are doing good work as well from across the divisions. Just come through. That's the place to be. Again, Friday at 1:30 on April 13th, the orientation and joint reception. And I got you. Come if you just come, I got you. I can help you network. I got you.
Because there are so many great suggestions, we might just try to pull these together and make sure that we list them on our blog, and so that it's all written down somewhere. And I'll try to save this chat, and all this information will be available on the blog, because I know we all want to know where the Black and Brown party is going to be. Everybody's asking questions, and Terrance is dropping all the details. So promise we will keep track of this information. You were going to say, Hui-Ling?
I agree with Tashal and Terrance. Go to the receptions. I see like Division G is saying like check the reserve if you need a reserve, but I know I was just in everybody's reception or whatever. I guess I went with people who are affiliated for the most part, but I don't think people are really checking you at the door. Like, just go and have a good time. New York is big on this like wine and cheese thing, so just enjoy yourself too. You deserve it.
Oh, and we do not charge cover to get into the reception, just so you know.
Great. So Shayna's going to close us out. Thank you all so much. Thank you for answering those questions on the spot, everybody. Thank you for asking the questions, those of you in the audience.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And Again, thank you to our wonderful speakers for joining us today and for having such an engaging conversation. This will be our last webinar for the academic year, and so we just want to thank you all again for your support this year. And if you have any ideas for future webinar topics, please feel free to type them also in the chat box, because we will be saving the chat. And keep an eye out for applications to join the DivG Graduate Student Executive Committee, which is the committee that puts together these webinars as well as the sessions at AERA that we hope you'll attend. And of course, we look forward to seeing you all at the AERA annual meeting in New York. And again, keep a lookout for all of our DivG events and come to the DivG business meeting. If you aren't a member of Division G yet and you've been considering it, please just come on through and talk to one of us, find any of the representatives. Feel free to send us an email. Yeah, and just reach out. And so everybody, thank you again, and we hope you have safe travels to New York if you'll be at the annual meeting. And thank you to all our speakers, and have a great weekend.
Great.